What's up, everybody? This is Mike from Polyform Studio, and you are watching Product Lab, the show that explores the product strategies of startups through interviews, experiences, and stories with the founders. Today, we are joined by Nicole Jarbo, co-founder of a company called Boost, who have set out to empower the next wave of gig workers and freelancers towards a future of financial freedom. So lots of exciting stuff to come on this episode.
All right, so welcome to another episode of Product Lab. Nicole, so happy to have you here, founder of Boost. I think to start, I'd love to just hear about Boost. We all want to know more about Boost.
Please.
Awesome. And I'm so excited to be here. Also, a spider just ran across my table. So if I'm distracted, let me know. Happy Friday, guys. I'm Nicole Jarbo, founder and CEO of Boost. And yeah, we're trying to build, I would say, more next-gen financial products. And what that means for us is we're trying to help Gen Z freelancers, creatives, anyone who's an independent worker with multiple streams of income better manage their cash flow so they can earn more money and meet all their financial goals.
Excellent. Yeah, I think a really underrepresented bunch there, and doing stuff like your taxes or just staying on top of your income when you've got all these different streams and you're working gigs and stuff. Super complicated for sure. Who is, you mentioned Gen Z, who's the average Boost user?
Very good.
Yeah. So the average Boost user is somebody who's probably 18 to like 25 years old right now. We're skewing like women oriented. These are folks who are creative souls. So we've got a lot of folks who are multi-hyphenates. Maybe they're actors, they're singers, but they also do graphic design on the side. They also write, do research. So literally, like, I think the future of creative humans. Right. And so folks, some of them are out of school, they're out of college. Some of them are in high school, transitioning to college, but really young folks who are trying to monetize across all of their different talents and skills.
Wow. Fantastic. I also think that there's something so interesting about Boost in that it is trying to disrupt an industry, something like banking that's so antiquated. Like even when you think about like your personal financial situation or like a business financial situation, going about it is just so painful, right? It's just such like a cumbersome thing to do, and I feel like the education is like really lacking around that too. So has that been like a big part of like the play for Boost, is like the education, like simplifying, or what's kind of like the approach?
Yeah, this is a really good question, because I think if you look across the space around financial products, or it could be personal finance, it could be accounting and tax support for freelancers, anything like that, people tend to focus on these sort of utilities and like tasks that people need. So one, I need help with my taxes. How do I do tax things? So there's that like educational piece that's there just because of exposure and experience. Our sort of mindset and philosophy around this is like, can we actually help people like make better choices with their time, with their finances, with their life, right? Like that's what people aren't paying attention to. And I feel like for me, a lot of that comes from my own background. Like I started as a teacher. I've taught at the college level. I've taught first graders, high schoolers. And when you're a teacher and you're under-resourced and your only job is to help somebody get from point A to point B, and then leave with some actual useful transformation that will compound in their life. Like that's the goal, right? Can you help them make better choices? Can you help them do things by themselves? And so I think, at the company, we try to focus on, are we leaving this? This is like a kindergarten teacher thing, so just excuse me, but like, are we leaving this place better than we found it, right? And I think what's happening in this space right now with a bunch of, embedded finance tools, APIs, all great tech stuff, we're missing like the human component, that we can't just help someone do something easier, faster, and cheaper. We actually have to make sure they're empowered to do that over time and build off of where they started with us, right?
Yeah, that empowerment part is so interesting. because I think about, myself when I was a young person, putting myself through school, working a night job, also doing whatever graphic design work I could get my hands on, doing some like weird freelance gig I found on Craigslist on the weekend. And like, I would always trend towards just what I enjoyed, not necessarily what was most profitable for my time. And, like there was nobody to teach me any better, and tell me like, actually, you should, if you put your time into this thing, or if you focused on this and that, you might have like some type of sustainable career here. And I think that that's what missing from these other tools like QuickBooks and stuff, where I'm inputting all this financial information, but it doesn't really tell me anything except for a summarization of what I manually input, right? So yeah.
Well, that's it. Like you're a regular person, Adam. Like you have interests. You build like cool stuff that makes you happy. And we focus on young people because they still have that mindset that they can do what they want to do. Right. Like they haven't been as afflicted like older people, like myself and the generations before me. They haven't been afflicted with this sense of duty, conformity when it comes to work and like corporate life. And it's the most fun place and the most meaningful place to build for, in my opinion, because these are people who still have hopes and dreams that haven't been dashed by corporate America and life and mortgages. Although one of the things I'm most stoked about is not necessarily the layoffs. I'm not stoked about all the layoffs happening in tech and these other places. But the silver lining for us is that it's opening up more people's eyes to like wanting to do what's meaningful to them. Right. Because we've always had haves and have nots, but now the have not pool is so much bigger. And what's interesting about that right now is that that have not pool now includes people that we thought had it made. But when you're working at, when you go to Stanford Business School and then you're a PM at Google and you get fired via an email, I don't actually even think they got emails. I think they just couldn't get in their email, like if that's the way I don't think this is funny, by the way, but that's not what we think of when we think of this traditional path. And so I think we're in a really cool moment where we can capture those folks who've been a little bit iffy and a little bit suspicious about the whole way of working as like a conventional worker. And we're trying to bring them to the dark side of doing what you want and making money and being able to pay your rent.
It's a scary thing, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you had like a cushy corporate job at Google, like you said, you're like a PM or something like that. You wake up and it's like a day and night transition, right? You went from the have to the have not now.
There's like a super interesting opportunity that's come out of all these big tech layoffs where, like you were saying, Nicole, you've got these people that, have this like Silicon Valley high school to Stanford to Google background that are now for the first time maybe facing unemployment, maybe some kind of like hard, scary times ahead, where they might be coming up against some human pain points that they've never experienced before, that kind of the rest of society experiences on a regular basis, and can take some of that like big tech solution finding to those problems. So that's something I'm really excited about in this current situation, is hopefully, some people have some experiences that open their eyes to other problems in the world than, how the next like food delivery app or something like that. Right.
Yeah. No more like Uber for X ?
Right. Yeah. Uber helicopters or something.
Yeah.
Although I feel like that's cool and useful, but this actually reminds me of an article I just read. I think I might have shared it with you, Adam. Kirsten Green from Forerunner Ventures. It's like a big consumer fund. Lots of people know them. Early stage, did Chime, him and hers, a bunch of great stuff. She just wrote this piece and it was called like it's like a cheesy blog thought leadership title, but good article, called The Next Game Changing what I think I have it somewhere. It's like the next game-changing companies will be life-changing companies. Um, Corny
Yeah.
title, but it's like the real thing, right? And I'm super excited, like you, Adam, for that. Like, what happens when people start building products that actually address human universal like needs and pain points? And I think a lot about being an underrepresented founder, like all of that stuff. And I just think this is like our time. And underrepresented doesn't just mean like gender or race or anything like that, but people who've sort of disproportionately had a huge amount of time feeling like a universal pain that runs across people, right? Like everybody's felt anxious about money. I don't care if you have a lot of it or you don't. Everyone's felt that like stressful moment with finances, or something around it. They've felt that moment of feeling like they're not doing a good job at their corporate job and they're nervous they're going to get fired or told something in their performance review. It's like that feeling of not having control over your financial and professional life. It like runs across every, sort of sector of people. And when I think about Boost and the opportunity, I don't talk about it all the time, but that's what we're really solving for. Like, how can we help people have more control over their economic and creative life? Right? Because like life is short, and like, can we help you feel more satisfied with your choices and more comfortable and more secure? Like, that to me is really worth working on. And I hope more people build stuff in this space, because right now I think the space is full of freelancer neobanks and products that help people send invoices and do their taxes. Totally fine. But what's underneath those problems is a real fear of being left with nothing. A real fear of having wasted your life on some like bullshit that like doesn't mean anything, right? I'm getting meta, but that's what I'm excited to see. Like, can we actually help people with real human issues?
Oh yeah, for sure. And like, at Polyform, we're so, one of the like taglines we have is helping great ideas become great startups and helping great startups change the world. And that kind of like social impact startup is something we're so passionate about, finding those folks, trying to help them, impact, well, I guess like compounding our impact by helping their impact be better and better. And, when you mentioned that, like, that like low level financial anxiety that most people experience all the time. Like, I remember back in the day, like, I'd be like every time in line at the grocery store, checking my banking app, making sure, doing like a quick calculation and make sure I have like enough money in my bank account to pay for the groceries I'm trying to buy right now, and like I still do, like it's been many years since I've been worried about paying for my groceries actually, but I'll still do it out of habit because it was like it's just ingrained in you, and it's like this like scar of anxiety,
Sure.
and a lot of people don't get out of that and they're just kind of stuck in that. And to create like a product that maybe, after using it for a while, they can kind of lay that anxiety to rest because they know that, my boost has been in the green for a while. I'm like, I'm in a good place, I'm making the right decisions, and to have some type of education and encouragement around what a right decision is like a whole other thing, because there's not enough education about that. And I just wanted to rewind to something you mentioned there, which was your whole kind of journey from educator to entrepreneur. You talked about teaching kids and teaching high school and stuff. Yeah. I'd love to just like hear some more about that, unpack that, and your kind of like roundabout road to being a startup founder.
Yeah, I'm going to try to make this quick because I feel like this is the least interesting thing we could chat about.
No way.
I grew up in Southern California. I ended up going to college in the Bay Area. I'm based in the Bay Area now. After college, I actually stayed to study education in grad school. And so I was really focused on policy, sort of how different groups access quality education, what are the barriers. I just kind of wanted to know why things weren't working for people. I think I've always sort of been naturally curious about that. And it's like a random thing, I randomly taught a sociology of sport class.
Hmm.
And that was really cool because any sort of highfalutin athlete that went to UC Berkeley between like, I don't even know the one that was 2008 to 2010 was probably in my class. And so it's really fun to watch those people play in the World Cup and in the Super Bowl. I
Wow.
like to think I made like some kind of impression on them. Anyways, after
Absolutely.
that, I ended up in New Orleans, Louisiana, where I was teaching. And so I was teaching young kids who had disabilities. I was a special education teacher and mostly worked with kids who were from like 7 to like 10. Then I helped open up a high school and taught older kids. Surprisingly, the experience was very similar.
Oh.
And then I ended up teaching first grade. While I was teaching, actually, I got really involved in like ed entrepreneurship stuff. And so I started my first side hustle, which was coaching people who wanted to start nonprofits and ed tech companies. So I
Hmm.
wasn't necessarily working on product stuff, but I was helping them raise money, set up the business operationally, and like work on some of their positioning and pitching for investors and funders. Um, then where was I? I went to DC. Don't worry, it's almost done. I ended up in DC and I was a philanthropic advisor for honestly like billionaire philanthropists. It was a very strange job, but my job was to be a steward and advisor to principal wealth creators is what we called them. So like the person who made the money for their
Right.
foundation. I would work with them to help them identify really cool opportunities in education to put their philanthropic investments. And it's hard to explain what that job was like, but the day to day sort of imagine me, a younger, more sprightly me, like flying to Jackson Hole or Houston and sitting in a living room with an oil tycoon who has a cowboy hat on and talking to him about why he should invest in the next charter school or send iPads to Tanzania. And so I did that for a little bit, ended up back in the Bay Area, and started doing similar coaching work as a side hustle, grew it from zero to about $500,000 a year, and then started experiencing all the money issues, goal pains, tax pains that brought me to Boost. And for the past couple of years, I've been just working to make it easier in a really differentiated way for
Mm.
people who want to side hustle and do creative projects to feel like they're making the right choice. And, just on that last point, we went through many pivots, and I know we'll talk about like the product stuff in a little bit, but it was actually my partner who I was trying to convince that one version of our early product was a good idea. And finally, I just heard this, you know what? I just want to know if I'm making the right choice.
Yeah.
I want to know if I should work here or do this or do. And I was like, oh, what a real feeling.
Yeah.
Like that uncertainty. Like, I just want to know I'm going to be okay. I just want to
Wow.
know that every choice I'm making is not going to royally damage my life. Um, and it was that, question that really powered one of our very, very early pivots to look at what is actually the real pain, like what is actually painful about what people are experiencing when it comes to career, work, life, and general happiness.
Yeah, that's like such a real moment and such a great example of like listening to your customer and kind of like collaborating with your user and learning something real and being like, oh shit, this is the pain to be
Dude.
solved here, is this like uncertainty and this anxiety and and where do you turn for that advice, right? You can't Google the answer to that question, right? So I
Yeah.
think yeah, that's so interesting.
Dude, I want to tie things back to the product a little bit here. Like Nicole, fantastic history. I think like all of your background, everything that you had been like working on, right? Starting in like education and then moving into like helping some of these like nonprofits raise funds and then moving into like the appropriate use of funds from like billionaires and things like that for like a more philanthropic. And now here we are at Boost. But did the first version of Boost, was it what it is today? Like, was it about education? Was it about like appropriate financial management for the individuals, the freelancers? What was V1?
I feel like I have not like told people this widely. I had a short-lived co-founder who knows all of this stuff, but generally most people don't. Um, the first version of Boost was like a mentor matching platform, and
Oh, no way.
which is like the when I see these now, I'm just like, oh, that's like nothing's happening with that. It's
No.
like, I couldn't do it. And it really came from the same sorts of fears, right? Like I just want to know if I'm doing this right. I want to know if I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
Right. And so I had spent all this time in coaching and teaching, and I'm like, oh, well, people need like a teacher. Like, we'll just give them a teacher.
Mhm.
And that was really hard. And you guys know this, you're busy, you build businesses, you do cool stuff. You don't always have time to just mentor people. And you
No.
can want to all you want, but there's a finite amount of time, and it's the only resource you cannot get back. And so that was tough for lots of reasons. Went back to the drawing board and we're like, we've got to make this a little bit more self-serve. And so we built an app that was, it was a mobile app that helped people almost go through like learning modules about around like being a founder and entrepreneur. I was so excited about this. I like thought this was the thing. I was like, this is the thing. It's
Yeah.
education. We're gonna crush it. It's totally self-serve. Then I put it in people's hands. And my brother, who Adam knows, Ted, who's amazingly great and so different than me. He actually just became head of brand at Discord. So just
Wow.
just a
What?
crazy, just a crazy, amazing human. He was like, give that app to mom and see if she can see what she does with it. And like, you know, my mom is my parents are immigrants. My mom's from the Philippines. She's just like a jovial, happy Asian lady. And at like brunch, I think it was me, Ted, and her, I just like slip her my phone, and she is so freaking confused about what this is and why anyone would use something like this. And that again was like one of those inflection points where I think I realized there that, you know, doing this work, putting all my savings into it, my time, completely pivoting from like a very comfortable, like cushy little practice, and doing this like requires me to try to get to more universal pain points that
Mhm.
I can like work through. Right. And so does that mean that, you know, we just teach people how to do things? Like maybe, but most people are not like me going down Wikipedia rabbit holes who want to continue to further their learning. Like they need a little bit of magic. And so that was like the first like real pivot that we did. And then we got to this point where the anxiety a lot of folks were feeling, the questions they were asking, they're always the same questions, right? Like, how do I get more clients and what do I charge?
Mhm.
Mm.
Now, the client one is not always the right question, I found, in helping and coaching people. Sometimes it's charging more, sometimes it's productizing, sometimes it's all kinds of things. And so I was like, all right, throw away that question, because everyone in their mom is trying to solve it with like freelance platforms. We're not going to spend time there. And then I started digging into like, how do I charge? And instead of like going towards prices and being like, here's what everyone charges who does graphic design, I was like, well, that's not helpful because people have different skills. They're better at marketing, whatever. We actually have to get down to like how people make choices about money. And so that's when we started kind of noodling and spending more time on how do you actually come up with a way to think about your charging earlier in your career if you don't have context to what other people are charging. You don't know how to evaluate your own skill set. But what you do know is how much your rent costs, and you do know how much you need to live, and you do know how long you want to be doing this kind of work, and you do know what kind of clients you want to work for, right? And so we tried to reverse engineer this like really natural process of taking all of that information in your head, making it clearer for people, and then allowing them to like play, have like a more tactile experience with what's happening in their head. So that's like the abbreviated version with like no crying, no getting like rejected from YC, and all the things that were happening at the time that also fueled these like different product iterations. But you know, it's the main arc.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
Dude.
And one of the things I really like about Boost that we've talked about and you just kind of touched on there is that this idea of this kind of like tactile interaction with your money, and that like so many other solutions are focused on automation, and it's actually like removing you further from the decision making process around making money and stuff like this. And I think that coming at it from the other side, saying like really get in there and understand your finances, that's the road to like feeling better about it and making or better decisions. I think that was a really interesting angle that you took, that other people, you know, like the automation route would have seemed like a more logical choice maybe, but I think at the end of the day would have poorer results for the user.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree with this because in all of our product meetings and talking to people, people are just like, well, what if it just automatically did this? And I immediately am like, you're not our customer. Like, we like need someone who fundamentally believes there has to be some amount of friction that like allows you to learn over time. And this reminds me of when we were looking for our first product designer, which was hell. And Mike, you probably don't know this, but I would send Adam portfolio after portfolio. I looked at, I think, 200 portfolios, and I ended up probably sending you 10 out of them. But every single one I sent him, well, this is what I think was better, because Adam would say, this is why I wouldn't interview this person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I left like collecting all of this data about what a professional product designer looks for in a product lead.
Mm-hmm.
And like that to me is the difference between you finding someone for us and me now having the confidence and a skill that will only get better as I get older.
Yeah.
You know, like that's the difference. And I think that's the more human part that a lot of these products are missing. We have this idea that everyone wants everything easy, but like that fuels that uncertainty piece we were talking about. When things come so easy, they can also go so easy. And now we're seeing that like in real life, and it sucks. Like you literally feel like you have no power, you have no agency. And I think if we're successful in this first iteration of the product and the company, people will be able to know their numbers and feel good about that next choice, and they'll be able to answer that question like, am I on the right track?
Mm-hmm.
And last thing I'll say is wealth management, personal finance, they have tools like this, and that's cool. But those two types of products require something very specific to work well. Like you actually need to have money, right? Like
Yeah.
investing in a robo advisor doesn't work if you have no money.
Mm-hmm.
Or retail investing. Retail investing does not work if you don't have disposable cash,
Mm-hmm.
right? And, you know, budgeting apps and stuff, that's great. But the mindset that triggers is a scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I only have this much. I need to cut out my Netflix. Like, I'm not cutting out my Netflix. This is never going to happen,
Yeah.
right? Like, let me have like some joy in my life. And instead of telling people to cut Netflix, how do we help them tack on a more meaningful side hustle that we know if they do consistently over time will help them meet their financial goals? And so that's what we're trying to build, because no one will build it, even though, you know, my experience tells me it's a much more interesting place to like play in.
Wow, I love it. Like the whole compounding of knowledge, right? Like the Adam and the portfolio example is such a good one. It sounds like exactly like the approach that you've taken for Boost, and like kind of like starting small, right? With like figuring out your financial situation and growing the education, everything like that to kind of follow afterwards. But like, so we're helping the freelancer economy right here. We're kind of like helping everybody figure their situation out. How did you bring on like the first group of people to like use this thing? Like, how did you attract them to, you know, come check out Boost, check out what we're doing. We're going to empower you to like live the life you want. Exactly. Like,
we struggle constantly with messaging because it requires us as like a content team and positioning team to be like vulnerable and like talk about the things that are hard about this. Because if you look across the space, you'll see people saying the same things like, make taxes easy or go faster. And like, that's useful. But if you don't know why that's useful, it's it's too much for the brain to comprehend. So this is
Mhm.
a constant struggle. There are various ways that we started to attract the first, like, few people. We went to job boards, because what better place to go
Nice.
than job boards, like, to find people who do side hustles. So we went to like college sort of freelance job boards. So Pangea is a big one. We got our first
Mhm.
intern there, who now is on our team full time. Jasmine, I think, Adam, you know her.
Oh yeah.
There's just like great talent out there who want more flexible work, and it was immediate to some people.
Mhm.
And I made this slide once of all these screenshots. We also did TikTok, and we have Pinterest too, of comments from people like, I need this, I thought I was alone, etc. And so we have more plans in the future to communicate to people that, like, you're actually not alone. There's a lot of people who have had this like itch and this like dream inside them to have more autonomy in their creative and professional life. You guys just don't know each other. And so we're trying to go places where those networks are starting to connect, knowing that it's a pretty isolating and lonely experience. And so that's something
Definitely.
that we're constantly thinking about within the product. Like, how can we provide people the resources they need? So job boards, and actually one of our biggest things was resources. So because we were working with this sort of like younger group of people, resources around freelancing, small businesses, side hustles, they were really geared and positioned towards millennials, particularly like elder millennials and Gen
Hmm.
X, et cetera. Right. So very small businessy type of things, where the brand just didn't resonate or connect with like young people.
Yeah.
Right. And so even the side hustles that they, suggest are not ones that are appealing or of interest to young people. And so content was a place that we were able to connect a lot of folks and say, like, this is like your guide to doing this. It looked like it was for them. It spoke to them in a different way. And so I think messaging, content, and being persistent in those communities is like a great early way to get folks interested.
Wow. Yeah. I love that. Actually, I just want to touch on that for a second. Like going to the source, right? Like the job boards, like places like TaskRabbit or things like that, right? I'm just like a sole contributor who's like working on here, but I'm not in contact with anybody else around here. There's no such thing as like resource sharing or like how do I improve my offering or things like that. So, uh, very cool way to look at it. Yeah.
They ask the same questions. And I think the same questions come up that people from a content perspective just ignore them and stop writing about them.
Yeah.
But they're persistent questions, right? And so we're really trying to solve in a very meta way. And I know this, and I have to talk to investors all the time, and they're like, "What? Like, why don't you just help them file taxes?" And I'm like, "Ugh, you're probably the wrong person
That's
to
not
talk
it.
Yeah.
to."
Yeah.
But I like, we want to solve this question of how much do I charge, but actually get to what they're asking. How much am I worth in the market? How much is
Mm.
my labor worth? How much is my brain worth? How much is my effort worth? How much am I actually worth as a person? Like, that's sort of like the meta level of that question. And
For
so if
sure.
we can help people get down there, and then help them see over time their historical data unified in one place, because that's really what the first product we're doing, which I call the Boost dashboard, does. It unifies all of these streams of income for people, and then provides them like a host of different analytics that over time would help them make choices.
Mm-hmm.
So, forecasting, other stuff that we're looking at, and it's about your short term and medium term financial goals, which is distinct from what's in the market, right? People right now are like, put money in a 401k, and if everything goes well, it'll double every 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
But we will make you no promises and just agree that this is a risk that you can do nothing about. Cool, great, we'll take your money. There's
Yeah.
that, right? Like, that is so far away from your life. And then there's like retail investing, which is gambling, which is
Yeah.
fine. But again, all of our financial products that are built for consumers really focus on these like elements of uncertainty. And so we're like, can we actually make a financial product that makes you feel safe? Like, that is a goal. Like, do you actually feel safe? Do you actually like believe more in yourself this month than you did last month when you made, 50% less profit?
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a like noble goal to go after, because there was I mean, we had a guest on recently, Brian Freeman, talking about the creator economy as well, and he was talking about how like in Gen Z especially, it's like, I forget the exact percentage, but it was like an overwhelming percentage of them like are either already making moves towards a freelance style career. They're already focused on like content creation as a profession or other types of, creative endeavors where they're their own boss. And it's so uncertain, and it's so, also like underserved, right? We've spoke about this a bunch, how that demographic, but especially also those freelancers in that demographic are just so underserved with all these tools. It's a great thing to be going after.
Yeah, I just think it's time to do something new. Like, I'm pretty tired of these like stupid consumer financial products. I appreciate all entrepreneurs and business building. I'm just tired of the same products. Like, and we're not even talking about some of the consumer financial products that actually I think hurt people. And that's sort of another thing that I wanted to do. It's like, let's build financial products that like actually help people build confidence and feel secure. And one of the ones that comes up constantly, especially as I talk to investors, because they're so prevalent in the space, are things like early wage access. Like, these things are obviously important, especially if you're low income, right? But over time, they're not necessarily helping folks in the long term in all cases, right?
Yeah.
And so without acknowledging that, and making money available to people who might not have, like, this is a generalization and this is not exact oversimplification of this for sure. Like, we all have different experiences with money and how to manage money. We all have different mindsets. If regardless if we had it or didn't have it, we all have different ways we approach this and think about it and execute on any opportunity money provides us. If you get early money and you need to spend it because you're feeling the emotional stress of like being unsafe, or you have different needs that come up, if someone told you straight up that you could have $200 today, but you would owe me $2,000 next year for the same $200, like, would you take it? And we're not like making that part clear for people. Right. And so that's why transparency is so important to me. And I think some folks think it's like a tiny thing that like makes the product look cool. But I'm like, it's the most important thing. Like, you're actually in control of your data. And Adam, you said this thing, it's like last year, that I think about constantly. We were like riffing on a lot of this stuff. And you said, it's like all these products are trying to, separate people from their money. They're trying to like take people away from their money. And that like has two meanings, right? The actual, like, I want your money, pay me for things meaning, but also this other more meta thing. I only want to talk about the meta shit, obviously, but more like meta purpose. It's like, I am making your own money opaque to you. Like, I'm obscuring your own money, so you don't even know what the heck is going on. Right. And like, that's kind of, those are consumer products, right? Like, they don't give people transparency to their hard earned cash. Like, we try to keep you as far away from it, which is another reason that a constraint that we put on ourselves from the product side is what needs to be automated because it's convenient and helpful. And like, where do we include friction because it's the right thing to build competency as you learn to manage money over time. And like, I want to just like hold a really like hard line about that. And even if it means we have to automate a bunch of stuff that we could make, or even if we have to make stuff manual that we could automate really easily in the beginning, I'm willing to take that risk because it's hard to forget things that you've learned. Like, it's extremely difficult to unlearn. And if we teach young people, especially creatives, like the people who add to culture and like do all of the cool things that actually happen in the world, if we're taking away their ability to understand their cash flow and their streams of income, we're taking away their ability to ask for raises. We're taking away their ability to add more income, get side hustles, to like meet their goals. A huge chunk of the people that we serve, they side hustle so they can help their families. So they actually need to know how much they're going to make. They need to know how much they can give back. They need to know what their profit is, and they need to know if they made more profit this month than last month. And so making those kinds of things like clear to people gives them the power to make choices, gives them the permission to be more creative, to take on more cool stuff, to give your parents more money that month, or whatever it is for you. That's my
Yeah.
soapbox. Definitely can talk about the product more specifically, but I just am so hyped that, I mentioned that Forerunner article. I'm just so excited that VC, especially someone like Kirsten Green, who like leads in the consumer space. I mean, Forerunner is putting $250 million into products like this that actually help real people. Like that is what I think the power of tech is. Like, let's actually further humanity in a positive way. Although I do think some calendar apps are like super helpful, I don't think we need like that many more of them.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think the calendar app is, I think that's a solved problem at this point. We can move on. But no, you make so many good points there. I do want to, dial into talking about funding for a minute, because we talked about, you pitching and sometimes knowing right away they weren't the right fit for you, and also talking about, VCs out there doing good. What was your experience? You shared some of your background too. That's in kind of the billionaire venture world, so you had some exposure to some of that through philanthropy. But what was your journey for Boost, raising capital as a first time founder?
It's terrible.
No.
I'm raising money right now. It's still terrible. I hear it never gets better, but I came from a position where I had more advantages than some people do. Not the most advantages, but I had more. I was used to talking to people who were different than me. That's a really big one, right? I knew kind of what their motivation was, right? Like most of these folks are trying to get outlier and outsized returns, for their investors. And so I focused a lot on a couple of things, running a tight process. And so for folks who are new to fundraising, this might not make sense, but basically what it means is, taking everything about fundraising and breaking it into systematic steps that you can take one by one. And so the first thing I did was I created my deck. I told a story. I got feedback from friends I knew had raised. I mean, people tore this apart. Like that took me a couple of months to get it to a place where people weren't embarrassed about it. And this is a super important step for folks out there who are raising, because if you're asking for someone to make an intro, if you're borrowing social capital from someone, you got to like step up your game a little bit, because they're doing you a favor. And I really learned that, like, how can I help my advisors and my friends help me better? So got my story ready, got my pitch deck ready. Design definitely matters. That is a quick thing. No need to go into that. It just matters. Pay for it. The second thing I did was I thought about what kind of investor would be good for me, because I either would get along with them as like a person, or I thought we had aligned values. I've spent most of this time talking about things that really like illuminate how I think. And I wanted to make sure I was meeting investors who think similarly to me and who would figure out how to support and trust me in a way that was comfortable for me. So I was like, here's like 5 things I want in an investor. And then I sent an email to all of my friends who I knew new investors and said, hey, I know I haven't talked to you in years, but I'm going to ask you a favor. Like, I'm starting this company. It's called Boost. This is what we're doing. And I want to raise money for the company. I don't remember how much I wrote. Like, I want to raise $500,000. These are the criteria that I want to see in people. So if you know any people who match this criteria, then can you please tell me? And then when I start raising money, I'd like for you to introduce them to me. And I did that, and people threw out names. And of course, I didn't know any of these people, but my friends knew them. So they're like, yeah, you like this person, this person, this person, this person, and I'll introduce you when you're ready. And so that was part of the process. So it's like setting up the process, and then there's the actual process. It's getting those intros and setting up the meeting, and then you chat with people and kind of tell them what you're working on. So this is a process. I'm just saying it because I listen to a lot of podcasts and people never actually technically and tactically talk about what to do.
Right.
And I think that's really important. They're just like, it's hard. Like, yes, it's hard, but like, why is it hard? It's hard because you're dealing with people, and it's hard for someone like me. I'm a Black woman, and I'm a first-time founder. I am not from big tech. I did not go to Stanford Business School. And so I didn't see myself, and still don't really, represented in like the broader VC space. So it wasn't like I could find some like role model that like represented me and just do everything they did. I had to lean into what I knew I was good at doing, which is like breaking down really complex things into really simple things, and like reverse engineering complicated systems. And so it was like, all right, this is a complicated system. How do I break it into manageable pieces where I'm getting to like the root of the hardest part of that part of the system? And so, I just kind of leaned into what I knew. But I would say for people who are doing this, the thing that sucks about so many things suck about venture. I know we're running low on time, so I'll make it quick. Venture sucks, but what I will say is like, it sucks because you're dealing with people, like I said. And I was just reading this tweet from Paul Graham. I started YC. Everybody, it loves him or hates him, actually, one of those two things. And he said something like, I'm paraphrasing, but like, you can't trust what VCs tell you, like why they pass on you. And it's just, and then he said, it's probably because you're lame. And I think me 2 years ago would have been like, this is so offensive. Like, this is why like there's not enough like people like me in the space. It's probably true, but also like that's how absurd this whole thing is, at the early stage, right? Like people get funded because they went to the right school. People get funded because they're really excited for that like one time they met. People get funded because someone just like came into a bunch of money and want to spend it. Someone like gets funded because a competitor got an offer from them, and that competitor turned them down, and you're their competitor, and so they're trying to fund the next thing. And the thing that sucks is there's so much asymmetric knowledge, right? Like the VCs always know more than you. And the best advice I got was from this one woman who did her first startup at 19. She was in YC, super, super cool. Wow. And she talked to me for like an hour and a half. And she was just like, don't try to win this game. I just want to tell you, you're not going to win. Like these people do this shit all day. Like you're not going to outsmart them. And so that was really helpful for me to hear early on, because I thought there was a way I could be perfect in those meetings. And the truth is that the only thing I could do was really be myself, and let people react to that.
Yeah. It's so there's so much psychology in the whole thing, and people, especially first-time founders that we know, they go into it so blind. They think, oh, I better put on my black turtleneck and do my best Steve Jobs impression.
Look the part.
Yeah, I gotta look the part. I'm a founder now, and it's and from a VC standpoint, I'm sure they can smell those people a mile away, right? Sure. That are kind of being phony about it, or they don't quite know their shit, and like it's hard to tell somebody like, yeah, you were just kind of like.
You're kind of lame, dude.
It's kind of a lame dude,
That's like why it sucks, right? Like it's so inconsistent, because the phonies get funded just as much as like the real ones do. And so it's so confusing if you're a founder. And then the other thing I hate is like the thought leadership like culture in VC, because you'll see tweets that are like, I'm seeing that all these seed rounds are happening if you have $2 million in ARR. And I'm like, that seems wrong. And I'm like, is that real? But you can't verify this information. And so you have to kind of go in and just be confident about what you're going to do,
Yeah.
and that what you're going to do can become venture scale, and
Right.
keep looking and talking to folks until you find folks who believe in you, and then they'll help you. And the very last thing I will say about fundraising, because it is really valuable and has changed my life in the past 6 months. We have an investor, January Ventures. Jen Neundorfer, one of their partners, was talking to me about this very important thing that I did not think about fundraising. And she was like, look, there are some VCs that are just about like incremental change. Like they don't care about investing in a saturated market where there's a bunch of competitors. All they care about is like getting like a 3x return, whatever. They will fund the same invoicing software or calendar app, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's who they are. But then there are some VCs and investors that are truly looking for one of one companies that are really focusing on that like disruptive new technology, that new founder that's going to change something in a whole market. And she was like, your job as a founder is to decide which kind of company you're going to build. And that was so stressful, but also freeing to me, because it explained why I was having such terrible conversations with investors.
Yeah.
Because even though I pitched my company early on like a accounting software that, is in a saturated market, what I want to do in my heart, what I think I can like continue to commit to for the rest of my life, is working on a true one of one company that does something really different for people. And that has freed me to focus on investors and friends and advisors who want to be part of a once in a lifetime experience building a product like.
Hmm. The ones who are interested in backing those disruptors, right? Rather than just getting that like 3x return. Get that cash back with some interest, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The ones who want to see the change, right? Make the change, be a part of that.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So I would say know what kind of company you're building, learn how to tell your story, um, and just like pound the pavement, have these conversations, like know who you want to give you money and go after them. And there are like so many of these people, it's actually disgusting, but there's money out there for everybody. It just might take more time than you want to spend.
The lightning round right now. All right. So I got 3 questions for you. Let's hear about Nicole. Top 3 SaaS tools. Can be for business, can be for life right now. Like, how do you keep yourself on track? What are you using? Top 3.
Life on track. So my favorite app that I'm using right now is called the Future app. It's called
The
Future.
future. Okay.
And it's an exercise app, and I talk to a trainer every day who gives me exercises, and it's awesome. It's like I have a friend in my
Is it like
pocket.
on video or is it like on text?
We do FaceTime sometimes, but
FaceTime.
really it's
Yeah.
like text messaging. And then I open the app and I get all my exercises, and she'll be like, hey, you didn't work out today, and shame me. And it's been amazing. And it's my favorite thing. It is my most used app besides probably like TikTok, which I'm not here to talk about.
Yo,
So
for real.
Future is a
Yeah.
big one. This is probably not, this is not in the category, but I do love me some streaming platform situations.
Yeah.
So I
Okay.
will
Like
just
what
say
I do.
that because I want to stay true to like the most impactful, important tech in my life right now.
All right. Yo, question number 2. You have a fantastic backdrop with a fantastic collection of books. Let's talk about the number 1 book you recommend about product or startups.
You know what? For someone just starting everything,
Yeah.
I recommend The Art of Start by Guy Kawasaki, because it breaks down like every single thing you would need to know about starting a startup, from pitching investors to building a product to marketing.
Wow.
So all in one shot.
There you go. It's like the one-stop shot. One-stop solution for startups. Love it. Guy Kawasaki. Let's talk about okay. What about who you're following? What about like the top LinkedIn influencers or Twitter accounts that you're following right now?
Twitter. Okay, I don't know how to say this guy's name, but I love him. And I think he's Nigerian. His name is Dari or something like that. He's like a product lead at Meta. And he just posts really interesting critiques about what's happening in tech. And sometimes he references pop culture. And I think he's one of the folks who's okay pushing back against some of these more pillar personalities in the space.
I love that, like the editorial approach, but he's also like the insider, he's working at Meta. He sees what's going on in the space, but then being able to like offer that kind of like editorial, here's what I like, here's what I don't like about what's kind of going on. It sounds like more refreshing than your standard
Exactly.
take, right?
I just love critique that comes from a place of someone's like core values.
Yeah.
I don't have to agree with you. I work with people who I don't agree with all the time. It's not about that. It's just like, do you stand for something? Do you believe in something? And are you consistent about it? Those are my favorite people to follow and learn from and be inspired by.
All right, yo. So this could be like a little bit of a long-winded one, but it's the last one that I'll ask you, and it just has to do with like we've talked about disruption so much, how Boost itself is like aiming to like largely disrupt, arguably like the freelancer, like the personal finance. But what's like the biggest disruption that you see coming in the space that you're in right now?
I mean, we've already talked about it thematically, but to me, it's I'm going to just talk about tech more broadly, like consumer tech more broadly. It's going to be products, in my opinion, that are there to help everyday people. I think they've been historically underfunded, and like that's where we have the most opportunity to do something new that will actually help people. And so I think I'm looking forward to innovations in consumer tech around healthcare, finances, mental health, transportation. Like I'm ready for that stuff. I'm kind of over like the new delivery service. Like I want to see products that help people's lives like improve.
I love it. And have the largest impact because there's the largest group of people that it could possibly be affected by it, right?
Yeah. And I'll say one more thing. I knew this was going to be one long guide.
No.
But like this idea that we look at such like a finite barrier for like where value can happen with a product, right? So filing taxes, for example, once they're filed, it's like done. You go on about your life and you don't think about it for like a year or whatever. I want to see products where the designers and the people leading product are thinking about those compounding positive effects over time. Like, what if people building for consumer were like, yeah, we'll help them do this easier, but what we're really trying to do and what we will hold ourselves accountable for is how they are 10 years later. And they like actually start having these like more ambitious goals about improving lives. And that's something that I've taken, with me from the social impact and nonprofit space, because they're operating on positive impact over a much longer horizon. And does that make the most sense financially for VC firms? I don't know, but I refuse to believe that we are not intelligent and resourceful enough to figure out how to appropriately connect long-term life improvement with like today technology.
I love it. I love it. And I think it comes down to finding the right team, backers, investors, whoever, who can see the vision for that 10 years rather than like the first year and how I'm going to 3x my money or something so short-sighted like that, right? Like, absolutely. So,
dude, I just think people would be surprised at how much people are attracted to you when you believe in something and like when you know yourself. And that was what it was like finding an early team. It was really hard to like, there's a lot of people who are not with the company anymore because of my mistakes, bad timing, all kinds of stuff. And I think what has always been true and what's true of the team now is that people are complex, but like my job as the CEO is to provide them resources that allow them to stay in the work. And the biggest resource that I'm trying to work on right now, besides money, is the vision. Like that's why I spent so much time talking about it today. I had a teammate come up to me yesterday and be like, I'm not really sure like what our vision is. Or until recent, she was like, no offense, but I wasn't really sure like what our vision was until like a few weeks ago when you started talking about it. And I was not offended. I just was ultimately like disappointed in myself because that is such a critical part of my job to make sure that people know that what we're doing is something that's important, that's here to help people in the long term, right? And that means something. It's something that like we can be proud of. And that's like my one thing with the team. Just do work that you're proud of. Like I can't ask anything more of you, but like real work that you would be proud to say, I did that. If you end up not on the team anymore or transition or want to do something else, like you should leave your time with us being really, really proud of something that you did here.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here today. We love having founders. We love having friends. I feel like this was only the tip of the iceberg for the Boost story and all the, great stories you have to share with first-time founders. Would love to have you again.
And of course,
hell
there would be
yeah.
no Boost without Polyform. So
Oh,
Oh,
that's the
wow.
soundbite. That's the episode right
it could
there.
have still been a mentoring matching product. That would have been terrible.
I
But thank you
appreciate
guys.
that.
I had a blast. I'm so excited to see how everything turns out with the podcast, and we'll keep you afloat with all the Boost happenings.
Oh,
Please
thank
do.
you so
Please
much.
do.
And Nicole, we would love to have you back on at a later date to hear about all of the crazy, amazing things going on at Boost and how you guys have pivoted again. Hopefully
Of
not.
course, I will
Yeah.
be here.
All
Amazing.
right. Thanks a lot from the Product Lab gang.
Hey.
We'll see you next time.
Sick.